Well, good morning, friends, and welcome to the Biblical Perspective for Saturday, June the 12th, 2021. We're going to get into some deep, deep subjects today that all relate to the beast that is forming. Now, as you're grabbing a cup of coffee and paying attention this morning, I want to ask you to just be patient with me. Many of you have said, would you please address what's going on in the Southern Baptist Convention, how it relates to these things? Well, I'm not going to do that this week. I'm going to actually wait until next week on the flip side of the convention to help evaluate some of the things going on there. I will be there in Nashville, Tennessee for the Southern Baptist Convention, and we'll see what's happening and relate it to the Bible and get a biblical perspective on what's going on in the nation's largest non Catholic Christian denomination. So, as we are there this week, we're going to look at something entirely different. And as we bring some of these facts together, I want you to just hang on as we watch some more evidence of the forming of the beast. And we'll get to the scripture that goes with that at the end. But some of the things that took place this week, you probably didn't even notice because the world wasn't putting a big emphasis on it. One is on June the 5th at the G7 meeting, they decided, the big seven that are supposed to be in control of the world's economy, they decided we need a global minimum tax rate. That's right. We need a tax rate that will discourage you people that are trying to get up and run from countries that may be about to impose even greater tax burdens on their people and their companies. So if you think you can just escape somewhere else, we need to have tentacles that reach around the world into every country, and we're able to tax you wherever you may be. So if you thought you were going to pick up and run to one of those friendly tax havens, don't worry. We're going to be able to find you. Now, they have a lot of details to work out to make this thing happen. Obviously, they'd have to have the cooperation of those other countries in the world. We'll see how that goes. But then I want you to think about something else. It's garden time. Have you noticed that there's the food starting to come in? You've already had some people bring us some vegetables. We're growing some tomatoes and peppers and beans right here around our pastorium in Winsboro, South Carolina. It's a time when everybody enjoys the bounty of God's harvest, and we start sharing some of that even with our friends and neighbors. As we get to a time like this, and we're thankful for the food God's provided us, I'm especially thankful for some of those, even in our own church, that are ranchers that grow cattle, chickens, other things that help support us with food. But the whole idea of food is changing right under our noses. And in case you haven't noticed this, it's been coming slowly but surely over the past few years. Will we eventually be like Star Trek episodes where you go over to a food replicator and ask for what might look like a nice, big, juicy hamburger, but there's no beef really in it? Guess what, friends? We aren't instant with the food replicators yet, but we are taking food out of food. Now, to understand that statement, taking food out of food, I want you to go back to a 2018 New York Post article. It was put in the Post on the 18th of July, 2018, almost exactly 3 years ago. And it talked about how lab grown meat will be on the shelves within 3 years and will be a common occurrence and will begin to take over. Wow, it's almost exactly 3 years later, and we see this happening all around us, from the Impossible Whopper to the startup corporations that are saying, we're going to give you meat substitutes that look just like the real thing, but it's not really the real thing. And you're supposed to eat this stuff and be happy. Well, is that what's going to take over in our food supply? And who's responsible for our food supply now? Quick question. Who's the biggest farmer in America? Now, if you name some corporation, you'd be close, but hang on. I'm talking about a person. What person is the biggest farmer in America? Now, hang on. For some of you who might have guessed Ted Turner, because he raises a lot of beefalo out there in Montana. I'm sorry, it's not Ted. Guess what? It's Bill Gates. Huh? What? You thought he was a computer guru, right? Did you know the single largest private owner of agricultural land in the country is, yes, Microsoft founder Bill Gates. His potato farming operation in Washington state is so huge it can be seen from outer space. It's the same operation that provides McDonald's with all the taters for its french fries. Friends, I want you to think about this for just a minute. Is it possible that we are seeing in the formation of the beast the ultimate control of our food supply? Okay, hold that thought for just a minute. And now let's get to something that's going on in America that is not making headlines, but it's happening all the same. Environmentalists have warned, and for some time they've been warning us, that our appetite for meat equals destruction. We can't raise enough meat because you see, if you're going to raise all these cows and these pigs and the like, they require so much care and they produce so much excess greenhouse gases, methane and the like from their extractions, and it's just not healthy to have all of these animals around. Now, environmentalists love animals when they're the wild animals you don't mess with. But when it comes to domesticated animals that seem to be the source of our food supply, it's like there's a war on them right now. And some of our farmers are discovering exactly how far they're willing to go to wage war on their ability to provide us with a safe meat supply. Well, these same environmentalists have told us that we've got to change our ways. We can't let all these people who have this appetite for meat rule the world, but we can fool them. Let's give them something that looks like meat, tastes like meat, has the consistency of meat, and you can spice it up the same way you do your regular meat, but there's no meat really in it. These environmentalists are now partnering with the Biden administration and the USDA, who have engaged in a partnership to now, hang on, conserve and protect land and save the environment at the same time. We're all being told that this whole idea of carbon is sin now means that we've got to do things to keep carbon from being put into the atmosphere. Now, carbon's been in the atmosphere since creation. You produce it when you breathe, and you breathe out CO2. So are you and I not enemies of the environment? I'm just saying. And as we look at this war on carbon, they're saying, oh, listen, every time you plow up a field that's been left fallow, you're releasing carbon, and that's bad. I mean, some of the lunacy that goes behind this is just amazing. So the answer is we're going to try to conserve more land and set more of it aside that cannot be farmed, cannot be used for these purposes, these nefarious purposes like raising cattle. So the USDA, and this is what I say is put under that file folder in your file on the end times. How is the beast going to control the world? Well, he's got to control everything, including the food supply. Okay, so the USDA is now bent on, which it says on its own website, transforming America's food system. Really, what's wrong with our food system? It provides for us. We've got it left and right. This time of year, go to the farmers markets, and even the food pantries that help supply those that are less fortunate among us. We have an abundance of food because our system works. But oh no, it doesn't really work because you got to understand we're destroying the environment and we've got to change our ways. So the USDA is now committed to transforming America's food system to have, quote, climate smart food, end quote. Now that's going to require some things down the road, more and more mandatory regulation. That's a phrase that's been bounced around Congress a lot here in the past year in regard to the United States Department of Agriculture. But they've got a plan. You can't just dump all this at once. You have to start with a plan that's been coordinated with the Biden administration that begins with this. There are three good steps here. Number one, voluntary regulation of the food supply. To do this, we're going to throw money at it. Yes, we're going to pay farmers more not to farm. We're going to pay more and more of them to begin to reduce their herds and stop farming so much. We're going to actually pay to reduce the food supply from a lot of these private farmers. And if they don't comply with everything we need over a period of time, we're going to then move from voluntary to regulations that are so strict they will encourage compliance. And as more and more of these regulations are brought down through the USDA, it's going to discourage farmers from farming altogether. And some of them will just retire and say, this is not worth it. Let's sell off the land. I mean, we need to build some houses for subdivisions anyhow. Or, oh, wow, wait a minute, you mean the government will actually pay an outstanding price for my land because they want to put more of it into conservation? Write me a check, my friends. I'm so tired of messing with all your paperwork. You can have it. So this is step two. Step three, though, and this is something that's not just being proposed as an idea, it's already got goals out there. National Geographic says that nearly 500 million acres are going to be by 2030 taken from private hands and given to the government for conservation policies, for the purposes of conservation. Biden has this 30 by 30 plan that means they're going to add an additional 440 million acres by 2030 to those lands that are protected, set aside, can't do anything on those lands. Now, the United States already owns like 28% of all the land in the country. Anyhow, 640 million acres. But a lot of that currently owned by the U.S. is used for producing some things we need. Sometimes timber harvesting, sometimes oil and natural gas production. But remember, all of this is being demonized to say, oh, no, we've got to just leave that land alone and there won't be any new leases. And let's figure out how we can, as these other leases expire, just stop this so that we'll be at the mercy of those other countries that produce the oil and natural gas. Let's shut down the pipelines. Let's shut down the production. We have to do it slowly, can't do it just all in one big move. Then folks would really know what we're doing. Instead, let's do it slowly so that the nation just begins to get used to this new normal. And as the beast begins to grow its tentacles all around the world, this is going to be something that other countries are going to follow suit with as well. As we say, hey, it's not good for these private individuals to have farms where they can just grow all the cattle or the pigs or the food that they want and use whatever seeds they want. No, we've got to restrict all of that. We've got to control it all ourselves. So right now, the president partnering with the USDA is deciding to do some of this stuff and can do it without Congress. Now you say, well, wait a minute, to set aside a national park, it has to be a vote of Congress. Oh, yes, that's true. But hang on, hang on. Don't need all that controversy. Did you know that the president, without any approval of Congress, can declare lands as a monument to antiquity or something of that nature, and literally by his own declaration begin to take land out of the hands of individuals and take it over with the United States government. Now, this is nothing new. We've done this before in certain situations and sometimes in wartime. But listen, nothing as unprecedented as this biggest land grab in the history of our country, where the objective is to take another 440 million acres out of private hands, put in the hands of our government to be used for nothing. Now, what is that going to do to our food supply? What will that do to the cost of food? And what will you actually be eating? When you go through a drive-through at McDonald's or Burger King in 2030, will you actually have real meat or some kind of synthetic byproduct that's been created in a lab? And is that really healthy or not? Oh, friends, listen, this is part of what's taking place in our country right now, and it's just evidence of this control of the growing beast that was predicted in the scripture. Now, what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the beast that Daniel saw in Daniel chapter 7, which, as you remember, was an unusual beast, the fourth beast he saw, the one that was in control when Jesus would return. He said it's the one that was different from all the others, extremely terrifying. It's devouring, crushing, trampling everything around it, okay, taking over. Matter of fact, it takes over the whole world. Never before has an empire done that. But we're watching the tentacles of this beast now reach around the world to gain its power. Will it be like a typical empire that has to march soldiers into a city and tanks and planes to take over? That may happen in some places, but it seems like there's a new way to take over countries. That's through their economies. You take over because of the monetary system, the economies. You use things like worldwide pandemics to say we've got to be on the same page here. And, and you use all of these things to manipulate countries into handing over their sovereignty to this beast that operates around the world. Now, we hear something about this beast in Daniel chapter 7, that this beast has some 10 horns on its head. Now, understanding that it has these 10 horns is something Daniel saw, but John, which is the book of Daniel for the New Testament, is the book of Revelation. John in Revelation saw something else about this beast. In Revelation 13, it says, I saw a beast coming out of the sea, and it had 10 horns. So immediately, he's talking about the one Daniel saw in Daniel chapter 7. It had 10 horns and 7 heads. Now, here's something interesting. 10 horns, 7 heads. Now, how do you relate this? Well, I know it may not be, but just saying, it is kind of suspicious that the world's economy seems to be run by 7 countries. 7 heads, maybe? Well, that G7 group seems to dictate what the rest of the world is going to do. They expand themselves out into a G20, but ultimately they basically tell the world this is the way it's going to be. And we operate based on their decisions. Isn't that scary? Well, John saw a beast with 7 heads, but that beast with the 7 heads also had 10 horns. Now, we've traditionally thought those 10 horns had to be physical kings. In other words, we would think of maybe the prime minister or the dictator of some country as being those horns. And that may be the case for some of them. But I want you to begin to think in a different way, because some of those horns may be the people who actually wield more control through this beast's operation than any king of any country. Those people who actually own the billions and billions of dollars and own the facilities and own the companies that run the world may be the ones actually in control. Oh no, none of them would want to step down from their lofty position to become the prime minister or president of one of these nations. They control a whole lot more without the permission of anybody from where they sit than if they took one of those positions that they might deem as being a puppet of their own control. That's why when you notice that there are some people like Bill Gates who seem to have control over a large segment of our food production, who also seems to have control over the idea of how we're going to vaccinate the entire world's population, and the very systems by which we communicate with each other through big tech, it makes you wonder who these 10 horns might really be. Are we watching the formation of that even as we speak? And as we look at some of these key players in the world today, and you can name some of those names. One of the keys to me is a guy named Elon Musk. Brilliant man, one of the most brilliant people I've ever seen, who rose from nothing. Who was he 20 years ago? You wouldn't have known where he was. He's not even on anybody's radar. But yet to form company after company that now is controlling what goes on planet Earth. Someone who has been able to put together the magnificent company called Tesla and electrify vehicles operating now around the world. One who has developed the Boring Company is working on Neuralink, that company that is going to implant into your skull, he's already working on this experimentally with some folks, implant into your brain that chip that can connect you to the cloud and to the internet. And the same Elon Musk who's at the head of SpaceX, wants to put us on Mars here within this generation, and at the same time is launching satellites by the thousands to encircle our planet so that there is a connectivity, so that everywhere in the world you'll be able to have the same access to the internet. And we can all be connected to this great system that the beast is creating. And oh, my friends, if you think that's not scary, oh, we all want it. We want the convenience. We want to be able to connect. We don't want to be out somewhere in the middle of the desert and lose our signal. Well, Elon has an answer to all that. And it's brilliant. And as he continues to put these satellites by the thousands around our world, setting this system up, which, by the way, is already operating in many parts of the world, it's going to be not only that great system for our convenience, but think about it. If you are the beast, how do you control the world's population? Well, number one, you've got to know what every single one of them 7 billion people are doing at any given time. How can you possibly do that? It's impossible unless you have the system in place. So, friends, we're watching it. We're watching the beast and the body of the beast being constructed right before our eyes. At the same time, they're saying we've got to have this global reset, my friends. In this new reset, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Really. That's where we're headed, my friends. But it's no secret to the Bible. The Bible said that in the end times, before Jesus comes back, there would be a worldwide empire, unlike anything the world has ever seen. So don't try to think it's got to look like Hitler or Napoleon or Stalin or Mao. No, no, no. It's got to look like something that brings all these people together under an umbrella of control that is undeniable, that is so evident that you've got to get on board or else you'll be left behind, that the pressure will be there for every single person to line up and, yes, worship this beast. You've got to get on board. And if you don't agree that this is the best thing to happen to the world, you, my friends, become the enemy. No, my friends, we're watching biblical prophecy explode right in front of our faces. Don't you miss it. Don't miss a week of these, because I have a problem just zeroing in on one issue every Saturday because so much of this is happening right before our eyes. Oh, friends, do the best you can. Keep raising the vegetables, to keep feeding your family, to keep looking up until Jesus comes. And don't be afraid by these things that are happening all around us. Why did he give us these words from the scripture? So we would trust him and know who's ultimately in control. Well, thanks for joining me today. I will be seeing you all this week as we do Wake Up in the Word from Nashville, Tennessee. And then next Saturday, I'm going to help you understand what's going on in our nation's largest Protestant denomination. In the meantime, you keep looking up and let's wake up in the Word each and every day. God bless you.